When you hear the word cannibal, what image flashes in your mind? You probably picture a wild, uncontacted tribe deep in the Amazon rainforest. You imagine primitive humans dancing around a fire, completely disconnected from modern society. Now, completely erase that image from your brain. The most ruthless, dedicated, and organized cannibals in human history did not live in the jungle. They lived in mansions. They wore fine silk, they attended grand balls, and they ruled entire nations. They were the kings, the queens, the elite scholars, and the wealthiest aristocrats of 16th and 17th century Europe. While they were building massive cathedrals and painting Renaissance masterpieces, these highly educated, civilized people were secretly participating in a booming global industry. They were importing, grinding up, and eating dead human bodies. And they were paying massive fortunes to do it. We are taught that civilization moves forward. We are taught that wealth and education cure human ignorance. But history hides a much darker psychological truth. When humans are terrified of death, and when they have unlimited money, their morals instantly disappear. Welcome to the horrifying history of medical cannibalism and the bizarre psychological glitch that made the richest people on Earth eat the dead. To understand why European royalty suddenly started eating human remains, we have to look at one of the deadliest translation errors in human history. For centuries, ancient Persian and Greek physicians used a natural sticky black mineral pitch called bitumen to cure ailments. It was found in natural springs, and it genuinely had some antibacterial properties. The Persian word for this rare, healing black wax was mumia. But as the centuries passed, natural bitumen became incredibly rare and expensive. European doctors were desperate to find it. During the 12th century, Western translators began reading ancient Arabic medical texts. They read about the magical healing powers of mumia, but there was a fatal misunderstanding. When European explorers traveled to Egypt, they entered the ancient tombs of the pharaohs. They saw the embalmed corpses of ancient Egyptians. These corpses were coated in dark, black, sticky resins used for the mummification. To the ignorant European explorers, this black resin looked exactly like the mumia they had read about. They made a horrifying logical leap. They assumed that the healing magic wasn't in a natural rock. They assumed the magic was in the preserved dead bodies themselves. The word mumia stopped meaning a mineral from the earth and started meaning the crushed flesh, bones, and bandages of a dead Egyptian. Almost overnight, the entire European medical establishment adopted a new psychotic belief. If you consume the preserved flesh of an ancient corpse, you will absorb its strength, cure your diseases, and cheat death itself. What followed was one of the most grotesque economic booms in human history. A massive, incredibly profitable supply chain was established to feed the rich Europeans' hunger for the dead. Grave robbers swarmed the deserts of Egypt. They blew open ancient sacred tombs. They ripped the pharaohs, the priests, and the common ancient citizens out of their resting places. These bodies were loaded onto massive merchant ships and sailed across the ocean to Europe. The ports of Venice and London were flooded with thousands of dead human beings, treated as nothing more than premium medical cargo. Walk into any high-end pharmacy, called an apothecary in London during the 1600s. You wouldn't just see herbs and roots. You would see a merchant standing behind a counter with a giant mortar and pestle, physically crushing a human skull into a fine brown powder. This powder was mixed into wine, sprinkled over chocolate, or simply eaten from a spoon. And it was incredibly expensive. Only the elite could afford it. King Charles II of England famously drank a mixture called the King's Drops, which was made entirely of powdered human skulls mixed with alcohol. This is where the psychology of the elite becomes truly terrifying. If a poor starving peasant in the streets of London ate a piece of a dead body just to survive, the authorities would hang him for being a monster. But if a king bought a crushed human skull for 50 gold coins and drank it in a crystal glass, it was considered advanced, cutting-edge science. The elite had successfully convinced themselves that their cannibalism was elegant. They rebranded a barbaric act into a luxury status symbol. The richer you were, the more human flesh you could afford to consume. But there was a massive mathematical problem. The ancient Egyptians only mummified a limited number of people. As the demand for mumia exploded across Europe, the supply of ancient Egyptian corpses started running out. But the merchants were making far too much money to let the industry die. So the market adapted, and it adapted in the most evil way imaginable. If they couldn't find ancient mummies, they would just make new ones. A massive black market emerged for fresh corpses. Merchants stopped traveling to Egypt and started paying local European gravediggers to steal the bodies of beggars, executed criminals, and victims of the plague. They would take these fresh stolen bodies, dry them out in the sun, stuff them with cheap spices and asphalt, wrap them up, and sell them to the wealthy aristocrats as authentic Egyptian mumia. Pause and think about the sheer, horrifying irony of this situation. The European elite, the kings, the lords, the billionaires of their time, were terrified of the poor. They considered the peasants dirty, diseased, and beneath them. Yet, in their desperate obsession to live forever, these wealthy aristocrats were unknowingly spending fortunes to eat the infected, rotting flesh of the exact same peasants they despised. They were drinking the ground-up bones of criminals. They were eating the flesh of lepers. The illusion of wealth had completely blinded them to the reality of what they were putting in their mouths. Why didn't anyone stop this? Why didn't the smartest scientists of the era realize they were eating garbage? Because of a psychological trap called the authority bias. When a society's most powerful, richest, and most educated figures confidently do something completely insane, the rest of the population assumes there must be a genius reason behind it. No one dared to question the doctors. No one dared to question the king. But there was an even darker psychological drive underneath all of this. It was the ancient, primitive belief in the transfer of life. European doctors developed a theory called the spiritus. They believed that if a person died suddenly and violently, like a criminal being executed, their life force, or spiritus, was trapped inside their flesh because it didn't have time to naturally leave the body. The elite genuinely believed that by eating the flesh of a young, strong man who died violently, they were literally stealing his remaining years. They were consuming his unlived life to extend their own. This wasn't just medicine, it was vampirism. It was the ultimate, horrifying peak of capitalism. The rich didn't just want the labor of the poor, they wanted to consume their actual life force. They believed their wealth gave them the absolute right to digest the existence of another human being. By the 19th century, the medical cannibalism trend finally died out. Not because people suddenly grew a conscience, but because modern science proved it didn't work. We look back at these skull-drinking kings and mummy-eating lords with pure disgust. We laugh at their ignorance. But human psychology never actually changes. It only updates its wardrobe. Today, tech billionaires spend millions of dollars to inject the blood plasma of healthy 18-year-olds into their own veins in a desperate attempt to reverse aging. We may not be grinding up Egyptian mummies in pharmacies anymore, but the primal, dark desire of the elite to consume the youth, energy, and bodies of the lower classes to cheat death, that has never faded.